So my name is Melinda Ramhit. I am a volunteer and mentor with the Young Women's Leadership Academy. I'm here today with 4 students, Lalita Singh, Ty Timmerman, Ashley Hassan, and Natasha Singh, to have a discussion, an important discussion about teen mental health. We have a great panel that I'll introduce in about 30 seconds to go through topics on teen mental health and the correlation between self-care and mental health, and just give you some ideas how you can cope and deal with emotionalities, mental health, and intellectuality when it comes to your family, your friends, and just for overall wellness. So we can go ahead and introduce the panel. If we can skip to the next slide, please. So first, we have Dr. Shanita Brown, who is a speaker, educator, licensed professional counselor, and trainer that believes in fostering transformative and empowering dialogue about intimate partner violence, African American women and girls, and mental health wellness. She's established a platform to break the silence and empower change regarding intimate partner violence and mental health through education, empowerment, and inspiration. We also have Sonya Sehgal, who's an educator, cultural curator, and program director who's located in Austin, Texas. Sonya engages feminist youth by exploring boundaries between technology, education, and community engagement. The program that she works with currently is making critical theory accessible to international youth audiences through their work with the Global Girls Prep. Ms. Sehgal has her bachelor's degree in women's studies and psychology, and she has conducted several workshops for teen focused on self-care and mental health. Last but not least, we have our own YWLA student, Amanda Prashad, who is a rising senior at the Scholars Academy and a participant in the Guyanese Girls Rock Young Women's Leadership Academy. Currently, she's a representative of her school and leads a cultural club and partakes in equity events to raise awareness. Both in and out of school, Amanda is an active member of youth medical teams and will be researching immunology at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Her future interest is to advocate for disadvantaged groups by specifically combating the injustices within the medical field. So right now we're going to jump into the panel and the questions. And first I'm going to give it up to Lalita Singh to ask our first question in regards to mental health and wellness. Go ahead, Lalita, take it away.
So how can teens gauge and address their mental health status following tough situations like COVID-19?
Good afternoon. Can anyone speak now or?
Go ahead, you can take it in whichever order.
Okay, I just want to say I'm excited to be here. Good afternoon, all, and I just wanted to share that I am being supported today to present and share with you based on an award to the Acoma Project from the Upswing Fund.
Thank you, very nice. So, Dr. Brown, you can go ahead and share your sentiments on the first question if you'd like. We can repeat it.
Yes, if you can repeat, that'd be great. Thank you.
Great.
Okay.
If you can repeat it, please.
Okay. How can teens gauge and address their mental health status following tough situations like COVID-19?
Yes, thank you. You know, teens have been really impacted. This is an important question. There's so much going on because they're dealing with so much isolation. So it's important just to kind of check in with what you're feeling, you know, kind of when we think about self-care and mental health, they kind of intertwine, you know, when you're thinking about yourself. So kind of check in with what you're feeling. Are you noticing that you're feeling a little bit more isolated or feeling down or feeling withdrawn? Kind of to check in with where you are, and then to acknowledge how you're feeling, and then to tell someone else about it. May that be a friend or a family member so that you can reach out and get the support you need. But I want you to know it is very normal, especially with COVID-19, to be feeling a lot of stress. Anxiety levels are up, depression because you're not with your friends and you're feeling isolated. And we are human beings and we thrive by connection. And so we are missing that connection. So again, just kind of check in with yourself. What are you feeling? And then connecting and telling someone else about it. And then kind of moving forward with the steps that you need to get help for whatever that may look like. You know, maybe doing something fun, or it could be a number of things, but I don't want to take away too much time. But I just first want to acknowledge that it's okay to feel where you're feeling after COVID-19. We're kind of still dealing with it. So it's normal to kind of acknowledge where you are.
Yeah, I just want to echo everything that Dr. Brown has said. And I think as teenagers, we already face like anxiety most times. And I think COVID-19 has placed an emphasis on the isolation that we usually go through. So it's important to recognize the extent to which being in a tough situation like COVID-19 has on your mental health. And from there, you can create your own plan. For me, I found it was important to just maintain a connection with my friends and check up on them, but to also not spend time nurturing one-sided relationships when you could be prioritizing yourself. So while creating and maintaining friendships and relationships is important, I think you can gauge your mental health just by focusing on yourself, figuring out what you like to do, exploring things you haven't before, and just finding something new to do every day and being grateful for the little things.
Thank you, Amanda. And I would add to that, you know, as teens, you know, we're trying to figure out our independence, and we're dealing with raging hormones. And then we add something like COVID-19. So kind of checking out what is our wellness plan? What are some of the things that we like to do for fun? You know, things such as exercise, you know, would be very helpful, or engaging in mindful activities, trying to stay present. Is so important. But just as Amanda said, you know, looking after for you, you know, our mental health is our physical, our spiritual, our emotional well-being. And so we have to kind of look at what areas of our life that we may need to think of, how can I do this for me? And so that I can continue to be healthy and showing up in these relationships with my friends and family. Thank you, Amanda.
Lolita, if you can repeat the question, because I see Sonya's on, so she might not have heard the question. Hi, Sonya. We gave you your introduction, so we're going to ask you the first question for the panel now.
Okay. How can teens gauge and address their mental health status following tough situations like COVID-19?
I definitely think that paying attention to the connection between your mind and body. So a lot of the times I think a lot of the times we think to separate how our mental and physical health are doing. But a lot of the times, well, you know, if you get sick, kind of your mental health will go down the drain. Or if your mental health is worse, then a lot of the times you'll start to feel really ill, or like headaches, or find pains in different areas of your body. And I think a lot of the time, a lot of these issues are often connected, and we often aren't made to think of mental and physical health in the ways they relate to each other. So I definitely think gauging some kind of bodily awareness is a really good way of being aware of our mental health status.
I want to thank you, Sonya, for mentioning the connection of the body. And I want to add to that if I can. You know, we are all collectively going through this trauma, this pandemic. We've never been through it before. And so paying attention, as we were saying, acknowledging, kind of checking in how you're feeling and looking at your self-care, but paying attention to your body. So for one, this collective trauma that we are experiencing, how is it showing up? Like she's mentioning, if you're having stress, how does stress look like for you? She's mentioning anxiety. Where do you feel that stress? Do you feel it in the headache? Do you feel your chest get tight sometimes? Or you're having you're very nauseous, or at times you're unable to sleep, or if you're waking up at various times throughout the night. That's how stress sometimes impact our body. And we have to kind of pay attention to that. But then we add in regards to this pandemic, and for teens of color, this race-based related stress. Another barrier, I would say another oppressive experience. We think about trauma and how it impacts our body, and how that continues to be another layer. So we have the pandemic as one stressor, this one trauma, and then we add the race-based trauma, and then we add in grief, and then we add in things such as family members who may have lost their job, and that we can feel the ripple effect. And I want you all to know that it is all normal. It's okay to be not okay, but we just don't want to stay there. And having conversations just as like this, that you can walk away with tools to not only survive, but we want you to thrive.
Okay, definitely. Also adding to that, thinking about how much our body changes, especially as teenagers, especially in a pandemic, a lot of the times it can cause things like dysphoria to like see your body changing and like not really know why. And I think especially if you're a teenager, your body's changing really fast all the time. And a lot of the times, I think like when I was in high school, it'd be really affirming to be around girls or people who are going through similar bodily changes as me. And so definitely thinking about like that lack of kind of, you can't really talk to your community about like what you're going through. It's kind of like this isolation compounding all these other issues.
Yes, I would add to that, being in community, in affirming spaces, especially due to this isolation and how COVID just disrupted and interrupt the academic school year, especially if you're one of those teens that was very active and you play sports. And being kind to your body, right? If you're so used to practicing and being on the go and doing things with your teammates and you weren't able to do that, being able to be in affirming communities, as Sonya was saying, that, hey girl, it's okay, you know, I'm a little chubbier around my tummy too, and sticking with the facts, you know, always sticking to the facts. It's a pandemic, for crying out. So no, we're not going to be able to run these miles like we used to for cross country, or no, we're not going to be able to practice. So it's going to be being in that community of affirming girls and community, even in your family, to support you during these times when you're not able to do some of these things and in tune to your body, that you're kind of being hard on yourself, but be kind to you. You know, everybody is going through something. So I want you to be able to practice some self-compassion and some grace, because this is tough. And we're pressing through, right through it.
I don't have anything else to add.
So, how can teens re-engage with the community after long periods of quarantine and limited in-person contact with friends?
I'll let someone else go first, and then I'll go later.
Okay. I definitely think engaging, I don't know how open y'all are to like going to parks or like re-engaging with nature in that way, but in a COVID safe way. Definitely like exploring. I spent a lot of COVID just exploring my connection to like the land that I was on, hiking a lot, kind of just like learning about my environment. And I don't know, through this, like people would usually see me doing that, and then I don't know, my friends would be like, oh, I'd love to go hiking too. And it's always like a great healing activity to be able to do something like that with friends. I know New York is a lot more highly dense. I live in Texas, so I know New York is a lot more highly dense, and there's probably not as many like accessible walking trails. Or no, there's a lot of walking trails, but it might be a little bit harder to find like nature or like patches of land where you feel like you can reconnect to the earth. But yeah, that's my suggestion.
My suggestion would be to do what you feel is comfortable. You know, do what you feel that is comfortable to you when you're thinking about your safety and your well-being. You know, look at this from a stance of, I'm re-engaging in community. This is a form of wellness for me. This is a form of self-care. And so perhaps, you know, if you're with some friends, as Sonya was saying, if you're going to take a nature trail or whatever, where, depending on where you're located, you know, you can ask the questions. What are you all comfortable doing? what is your level of comfort if perhaps if we go bowling? Are you comfortable with that? Not everyone has the vaccine. I think we have to be okay with asking questions, and being assertive and sharing that what you're comfortable doing and what you're not comfortable doing, and coming up with suggestions and being okay with that response, but still trying to negotiate. And don't leave yourself out, don't minimize how you feel. Don't minimize or think and kind of minimize yourself or your thoughts and your feelings about a particular activity when you're trying to re-engage, because this is another level of anxiety for people re-engaging in the community. I would say during this vaccinated era that we are in, this COVID vaccinated era in COVID-19. We're moving through this phase now. So a re-engagement really presents another level of anxiety, but sticking to the facts, acknowledging what you're comfortable with doing, and kind of negotiating and doing something that fits your area where you're safe and still can be able to enjoy yourself. Because it's all about your mental wellness and your well-being. You want to be safe doing that so you can relax and bring down those high cortisol levels and bring all that down so you can enjoy your environment and your friends.
Yeah, I definitely think it's difficult to re-engage with the community after quarantine. So I would say you just have to take things like step by step. So going out on walks alone, like that's what I used to do before, but now that in-person contact is increasing, I feel like inviting someone to walk with you, that's one step, and then that can evolve into like other COVID-friendly activities that can help with your social interaction and happiness. I feel like because we were online all the time, everyone got a little bit more lazy, and it's difficult to just like improve on that because I know as a teenager, I find myself lacking motivation, and not having that source of energy can even spiral into something more mentally harmful. So personally, like what I've been doing is just like spending time away from my screen. And I know it's hard because in my generation, we're like so reliant on technology, but just like spending more time doing other fun activities with the people that you love can help you re-engage with your community.
Yes. I like what you mentioned, Amanda, about taking, it's a process for sure. And so, everybody has a different process, and be okay with that. If you went somewhere by yourself alone and then you try something out with someone else and you didn't feel comfortable with it, then that's okay. And if you try, walk in a park with another friend and you feel like you can add someone else or try another activity, that's okay as well. Just it's we got to just be patient, and step by step. As for me, what I did, it took me a while to get to the place of going to restaurants. And so I started going to restaurants and sitting by myself outside. So I went from just sitting outside to gradually going in, and I'm still uncomfortable a little bit with inside the restaurant, but I will assert, you want to go out, I would prefer an outside patio. That works for me.
Absolutely. And like talking about COVID, I'm happy that you mentioned COVID anxieties earlier, because I think a really big thing that, or I don't know, along with COVID anxiety is just like readjusting our social batteries. Like so many of our social batteries shrunk so much during the pandemic. I'm still like trying to readjust myself going back into the vaccinated era.
Yeah.
Of I don't know, I feel like most of the times that I'm going out, I'll like feel anxiety, or I'll be like, oh my god, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know
Right.
if I have the social battery for this. But truly, I will say most of the time that once I'm actually there, I'm like, oh, I'm having a great time. I'm so happy I came. But the COVID anxieties are so real, and I think definitely for me to help cope with it, I've definitely been taking like long breaks in between, I don't know, like I feel like pre-pandemic, I was kind of go all the time, and now I'm just giving myself a lot more time for social breaks, letting myself stay inside in between going out or like social activities, because my social battery is still returning from war.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Great. So great conversation going. I'm loving it. We're loving it. So we can't have this conversation about COVID and mental health without talking about burnout. So I'm gonna turn it over to Ty to ask the next question.
Thank you, Miss Melinda. And this question is for Sonya. How has Zoom burnout affected teens' mental health, and what are some activities that can help?
This is a really good one. Zoom fatigue is so real. I definitely, in the periods in which I was on Zoom for like 40 hours a week, I remember afterwards I would not be able to go on my phone. I wouldn't be able to look at my screens because it just, my brain felt so fried. So that's definitely when I started to do the like going on walks more, or kind of finding other hobbies that would engage my hands. A lot of the times I started reading or listening to podcasts a lot more during that time, because podcasts I could like, listen and learn, but I didn't have to stare at a screen. I could, I don't know, knit or do some other kind of activity that would engage my mind and body without, I don't know, definitely I think that increasingly like in the technological era we're in, a lot of our social media is like literally addicting. And so kind of coupling Zoom, the large amounts of times that we're on Zoom staring at our screens, along with like trying to keep up our social life through our phones, it's very, very, it's like such a compounding, and like I mean, I don't know what kind of effects it has on I definitely think it does like have like an addictive, not necessarily the Zoom, but social media is definitely like have kind of an addictive impact on my brain. I think like my attention span became a lot shorter as soon as the pandemic hit. Yeah, and then like y'all had mentioned kind of like you become more lethargic about doing things. So it's really, you really have to be intentional about what you do with your time and how you want to be online. I definitely like set up some kind of like screen times on my iPhone, so that way it would notify me after like 15 minutes. Yeah. Does anyone else have any input?
I definitely echo what you mentioned about it being addictive. There's research to support the impact of social media on teens' mental health, especially with this, because we're, as teens, you're growing and you're thriving, you're trying to build your social support system and get your friend circle. And then this idea of likes and, views, and that kind of drives a person's anxiety. But it also can really impact their self-esteem. That, if their friends say, I made this video, or I put something, now we have TikTok, no one is following me. Why no one is following me? Does that mean that something is wrong with me, or they didn't like my post? So yes, we have to be mindful of the impact. It does impact your mental health. There are some benefits of it, engaging with people in your community virtually, but you have to have balance. That's the key, like balance. So with Zoom, we got to have breaks. Even for the trainings, which is why, part of the trainings that I've been on, if it's going to be a training, they say we'll have a 30-minute break, or if not a break, you go 30 minutes of discussion and then you have a 10-minute break. Or we have now these breakout rooms, because we're trying to reset, we're trying to recenter, we're trying to refocus. Some ideas and helpful strategies such as box breathing. It's really helpful to really tap into, we're feeling anxious, is just drain. Breathing in for 4 and holding for 4, and then exhaling for 4 and then holding again. And just think about a box, a square, and that's why it's called, you may also hear square breathing or box breathing. But that is a very quick tool to kind of recenter when you're just tired, your brain is fried, and kind of recenter and just taking a break from social media, Zoom, computer, the screens. I put my phone on a do not disturb at a certain time to kind of allow myself to take a break. And I noticed how I'm feeling. I'm like, wow, it feels good to not always be on my phone. I can really enjoy SVU. I can enjoy this picture on Netflix because I'm not in a break going to Facebook or going to check Instagram. And, sometimes it can be addictive. And if you actually kind of assess, you're like, wow, I never realized how much time I spent on social media.
Yeah, I deleted TikTok off my phone like 2 or 3 days ago because I was just spending too much time on it. And I've literally been craving it. I've literally been like, I just want to scroll through TikTok right now. And I'm not letting myself re-download it until this phase passes.
Yeah. Good for you for recognizing
It's
that.
difficult. It's like, it's actually, because it like produces so much serotonin in your brain. It's just such a passive, and it makes you so happy. Like, what? I don't know. I crazy.
Okay, Sonya's bringing up the term serotonin. For those who don't know, serotonin is a chemical in our brain that regulates our mood, and 90% of serotonin is made in our stomach and our intestines. So it is important when we think about self-care and our emotional wellness about our gut. Like, what are we eating? What is our nutrition? What does our diet look like if we're not feeling good, or if, like, we're down in the slumps? It could be a lot of being, with our serotonin levels and what we're put in our bodies. So that's a key thing too.
That like brings us back to the whole like mind body awareness.
Absolutely. There you go, Sonya.
Yeah. Cool.
Amanda, would you like to add anything to the question, or?
Yeah, just going back to like Zoom burnout affecting teen mental health. I feel like what Sonya said, like about like deleting social media, it takes a lot of self-control and it's not an easy thing to do. So don't beat yourself up about it if you're addicted to social media, because I don't know if addicted is the right term to use, but I know I'm very dependent on it. Something that I did do was that using the screen time limits, and I think it's actually been really helpful. But the reason that so many of us teens are just reliant on our phones is because of COVID, that was our only form of social interaction.
Absolutely.
And we also have this fear of missing out that surrounds the idea of teen mental health. So just like having that fear of FOMO in the back of your mind all the time, you always want to be on your phone. You always want to see what your friends are doing. But think about yourself before you think about others. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Once you start like prioritizing yourself and not caring about what other people think of you, or just like comparing yourself to other people in general, it can be really helpful. And I think that just like staying away from the screen makes me improve mentally. So just like don't compare yourself to the screens. Nothing on social media is real anyways. So just
absolutely
like setting limits for yourself and just like setting your own boundaries, it can be really helpful, especially with this social media burnout that's happening.
Absolutely. I'm really happy that you mentioned, wait, what did you say? Never mind, I'm so sorry. I don't know. I had something in my brain, but I just gone. Yeah.
No worries, Sonya. This is actually a great part to transition to our next set of questions, which have to do with building self-awareness and those self-care routines that you guys are speaking of. So I'm gonna hand it over to Ashley to ask the next question. Go ahead, Ashley.
This question is for Amanda. So how can teens exercise their independence while building self-awareness?
Okay. I think being independent is something that goes hand in hand with self-awareness. So it's important to recognize how you're doing as a person, and by acknowledging that, you can then self-regulate in order to like adapt new skill sets that can create you into a successfully independent person. Being independent doesn't mean completely isolating yourself, and that's something I had to teach myself. It means having the confidence to determine what you're capable of doing. So while you learn more about yourself by building self-awareness, you can create this own intellectual skill set that can help you understand what your place in this world really is.
Dr. Brown, anything to add here to Amanda's question?
Self-awareness, how can we build self-awareness? Again, I think it's important to, when we think about checking in, right, and thinking about our well-being, it's important to figure out what you need, and what you don't have and what you do need. Looking at activities that you can do for your emotional well-being, doing things that are fun, doing things that are building connection. As I mentioned before, we are relational beings and we thrive by connection. And so when we keep in mind the impact of COVID and then all of this Zoom, pausing, how can I still find time to connect with a balance? So perhaps we can do an activity maybe a fun activity such as Kahoot, or a game where I'm doing things virtually and still involved in connection, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? I'm being self-aware what my needs are, what I may need. If you know that you are an anxious teen, being aware of kind of carving out time in regards to what I need for my own level of anxiety, or I may need to take breaks, or I may need to walk more, I may need to engage in meditation or in yoga, or I may need to engage in some box breathing. But also it's about being aware of what you may need and kind of being in tune to yourself. That's about that self-care. We can't be selfish, self-care is not being selfish. It's about a form of self-care. It's about a form of self-care, it's a form of self-love, self-respect. Someone mentioned earlier, I think Amanda, Sonya mentioned boundaries. That's a form of self-love. That's a form of self-care. Saying, no, I can't do this, and being okay with that. We have to really be mindful about mental health now more than ever.
Sonya, anything to add as well?
No, I think Amanda and Dr. Brown did a good job.
I agree. So I think we can move to our next question. Go ahead,
So
Ashley.
this one is for you. How can teens check in with their level of self-awareness?
Is me? I don't know.
Amanda, how do you check in with your self-awareness
I
level?
think I wasn't trying-
So Sonya doesn't feel the pressure of not having an answer, if anyone else has an answer.
Okay, so for me, self-awareness in like simple terms is just understanding your own identity and in terms of your feelings and your emotions. So you can check in with that just by seeing how accurately you're capable of determining your feelings, emotions, and needs. I think it's similar to what Dr. Brown said before. Like, I personally associate a high level of self-awareness with just being able to comprehend how my emotions, needs, and feelings influence my decisions. And then if those things lead to good decisions, that means that I have a high level of self-awareness. But if I lose control over my feelings, emotions, and needs, and I don't understand that, I think it can point to me having low self-awareness.
Definitely. And I think something like I feel like a lot of activities that can increase awareness. Journaling is definitely a great avenue by which to like kind of, I don't know, whenever I was younger, like in high school, I didn't really know how to handle my emotions. A lot of the times, like writing letters to people if I was feeling really strongly in some way, but I couldn't really explain why. Just writing letters to people a lot of the times would help me recognize patterns within myself or within the other person. Like really would help me like flesh out why I was feeling so upset, or like why if I was ever in the situation where I was like, oh, I really don't like this thing, but I have no reason for it, kind of like writing about it to myself truly helps bring up stuff.
Yeah, I think even for me, I've had to acknowledge, kind of check in. What do I need now? My needs may be different now than what they were prior to COVID, and kind of being okay with that. I've had to kind of just look at, really assess, like, what does Dr. Brown, what does Shanita need now? Right? Perhaps I needed more exercise prior to that, but now perhaps I may need more being outside or more meditation to kind of recenter. And going back to what Sonya was saying, connecting the brain and the body. I know what yoga does for me. So now for me now in this very moment, and being very transparent, I need more yoga than I need cardio, because I have learned that, the yoga and the mindfulness bring down my cortisol level, and that cardio, and I love spin classes, but that cardio kind of revs it up. So for me, in this high stress environment with, this new COVID anxiety, I need more yoga. I need more centering, kind of relaxing my mind and body. And that's what's working for me. And that's how I am becoming more self-aware of what I need. And that's what I encourage you all to do as well, kind of being more self-aware of what you need, and then acting on it and putting a plan into place.
Absolutely. A lot of good, like, I feel like type of really good meditations that help with like bodily awareness. If you like look up like body scans or like sound
Yes.
scans, a lot of the times they'll kind of lead you through activities where you're kind of investigating different areas of your body. Literally, like you're really like feel just the way that they have it set up, like you're really feeling what's going on in your head, what's going on in your stomach, what's going on in like your legs. And a lot of the times through this, like I'll start a meditation and come out and realize that I was starving. I had no idea. I was so hungry.
Right.
Or sometimes I'll like come out feeling more uncomfortable, but I'm like finally aware about, you know, maybe cramping in my leg. Or there's a lot of the times that we just ignore these mental health problems, these like bodily issues that we're having. So definitely different meditations or yoga is really
Yeah.
good for.
And I just share some of in the apps. I just share some of the common apps to use for meditation and yoga. The Calm app, Headspace, Relax Melodies is a free app. Liberate is an app made by Color of People, by Black people for people of color. If you're looking for a more culturally affirming space when you're doing your meditation, that's a free app as well. But yeah, I think it's so important for teens to kind of check in with what they need and kind of yeah, I love yoga meditation as well. Check in with what you need and put a plan to place. You know, we got to activate, we got to implement these strategies. And you check in, you become more self-aware with what you need, and it's okay to kind of figure out, maybe do it for 3 months. What do I need now for the summer? And my needs may be different from the fall, right? When we're talking about going back to school, you know, being face to face. So your needs may be different, and that's okay.
Absolutely. So now that we've checked in with the self-awareness and have that in our tool belt, we're now going to switch to our questions about self-care. So I'm going to hand the baton over to Natasha to ask our self-awareness, or I'm sorry, self-care questions. Okay.
Well, there's some questions in the chat. Do you want us to answer these now?
Not in this moment.
Okay.
I'm gonna go ahead and ask our next question. So
Okay, so let's talk about self-care. So
yes.
Self-care is a lifestyle, you all, okay? It is not about getting manicures and pedicures. It's about things that you are doing on a consistent basis to maintain your emotional well-being. It could be things such as, you know, journaling. It could be taking a walk. It could be yoga. And we're talking about things that you're doing. They don't have to cost money. There are things that we could do for free. You are teens. So a lot of times, you know, self-care has become this buzzword where I got to spend a lot of money, but that's not true at all. It's a lifestyle. And I hope, and it sounds like you all are beginning to create and cultivate this life for self-care, because you need it, you know, and that's how we think about being leaders. If we're not well ourselves, how can we lead others? Right? So how can we lead and do the work that we're doing? And so it could be things such as taking some time to just walk, turning time off of your TV, anything that you're doing, you think about your spiritual, your physical, and your emotional well-being. That's what self-care is, a lifestyle. And it's a process to get there.
I feel like your self-care routine can vary depending on the type of person that you are. Like, I know some find enjoyment in exercising while others think that's torture, like myself. So for me, I personally just think just setting time aside to care for myself is self-care. And that can even be just like watching my TV show, because after being in school all day and working, it can be very tiring, and you need to give yourself just that time period to relax.
Absolutely.
Spending that time working on loving yourself can benefit your well-being mentally, and then that can also help you physically thrive, like how you were talking before, how like your mind and your body are connected. So you just have to like listen to your body but also listen to your mind. Like, don't torture yourself into what other people consider their self-care routine to be. Try to cater it to your own needs, because choosing to overwork yourself and stress yourself out can cause you to spiral, and then that's going to negatively affect your physical and your mental health, which is why self-care is so important to prioritize.
Most certainly. And it's so important to be mindful how we're talking to ourselves, right? And look at these thoughts that we're telling ourselves. We don't want to beat ourselves up. We want to be able to empower ourselves. We want to say, okay, today I'm going to do this. And tomorrow, part of my self-care is just rest. Right, just rest. And it does vary. Thank you, man. It varies from people to people. It may change. Again, being self-aware, what do I need now in the summer may change from what my self-care regimen may look like in the fall. So, being flexible as well.
Right. And then also Dr. Brown was talking about like how a lot of the times when we are made to, or like whenever popular culture kind of talks about self-care, a lot of the times it's been around buying stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I definitely think it's really important to investigate the relationship between self-care and consumption. Because a lot of the times people just consume, like retail therapy. I know a lot of people that use like retail therapy to make themselves feel better. And of course it never actually like truly ends up helping their mental health in the long term. Like, they get their objects and then they're just kind of tired of them until like they have another reason to buy more things. Yeah, I think American culture like really encourages us to consume things as our means of like self-care.
Right.
And so I definitely am happy that we're investigating that.
Right. And kind of, thinking about just taking a walk. It's not about, and if you want to do retail therapy, that's okay. But self-care can be just, I'm not going to answer emails, so I'm not going to respond, engage, like maintaining healthy connections, maintaining people, friends that are healthy for your well-being. That's a form of self-care as well. So again, it's about, like you're saying, it's this lifestyle. It varies, but it doesn't always think, like what we hear of the cultures that, hashtag self-care, I'm at the mall, hashtag self-care because I'm getting a manicure. Self-care to me for the rest of the day, really, no emails.
I think
no emails.
Deconstructing that like capitalist consumer culture is important, because you need to recognize that self-care, it's not just like one specific thing and it changes all the time depending on how you're feeling. So you need to figure out what you specifically need to prioritize. And instead of focusing on things like retail therapy, while it can be helpful, it's only temporary. So using distractions as self-care isn't going to work out for you in the long run. So you need to like set aside a routine for yourself to figure out how you can specifically cater to your own needs.
That's what I'm talking about, Amanda. It's a lifestyle. It is a lifestyle. That retail therapy is just temporary. We're not getting to the core. And so it's so important when we think about self-care and the connection of mental health, they're integrated. They go hand in hand. You can't have mental health and mental wellness without thinking about self-care and that self-awareness and that insight.
Definitely. I also think a lot of like, I don't know, I think Amanda said something earlier that just made me think of this, but I think a lot of our self-care can be like escapism a lot of the times, like watching TV or like retail therapy, like we're just kind of trying to distract our mind from the realities in front of us, which is totally valid. I participate in escapism all the time, but definitely kind of making sure that that's not the entirety of what our self-care is, or that like that's not the bulk of like what we do to care for ourselves. Is like, I don't know, definitely I think just a lot of times it's easier to like escape what's going on in your day-to-day and just kind of like distract yourself for a little bit and call that self-care, then like investigate like why, like what parts of you actually need care.
That's a great part. That's a great point, Sonya. Just think about self-care. We have to be intentional, right? This is our well-being. This is our mind, our body, and our spirit. So we have to be intentional about our well-being, intentional about our self-care.
Totally agree.
Natasha is connected with us now, so she's going to go ahead and continue the questions for the panel. Okay. Go ahead, Natasha.
Hi, this question is directed towards Dr. Brown. Does your definition of self-care change based on being a woman of color?
I'm sorry?
Does your definition of self-care change based on being a woman of color?
I think my definition of self-care, I think being a woman of color, and having my experiences and my intersecting identities have shaped my definition of self-care. Because I am aware of how I show up. I am aware of how my multiple identities create multiple experiences of oppression, and how that looks for me. And so, yes, I think I have a cultural framework because I am a woman of color. I'm thinking more about self-care as thriving and survivor mode. I've also assessed how my culture, from a culture context, of how that has influenced my idea of being strong and taking a break, and whether or not that's going to be frowned upon. I have to keep going and going and going. So yes, for me, being a woman of color and applying the culture context really does shape my definition of self-care. Mm-hmm. And paying attention to that because of this strong Black woman phenomenon that I have to keep going and going and going. And that really creates a lot of barriers for young Black girls, young Black women of color, that we have to be strong because our ancestors have been strong for so long. But it's important now to talk about rest and having harmony and having balance and being okay with that. We have to change the narrative. And I'm glad we're talking about this because it starts with you all.
I'm sorry. Sorry. I'm sorry if you hear the music in the background, but being a woman of color, like I can blatantly say that it means I need to prioritize my self-care twice as the amount as a white woman does because I'm working 5 times the amount as a white woman does. So like Dr. Brown was talking about, there's a lot of like cultural stigma that goes along with mental health, especially in my own community. Like I can say that as a teenager in an immigrant household, prioritizing my self-care is really hard to do without being viewed as lazy. Like being lazy is associated with caring for yourself and not overworking in like my parents and their generational terms. That's just the way it is for me. And I know like many of my first generation friends can relate to that, but it's important to set time aside to just care for yourself. Like we can create our own culture from now. And as the first generation, I think we need to bring attention to that and raise awareness to the importance of what self-care really means for our community.
Yes, absolutely.
Definitely. Also,
Thank you,
kind of, yeah, definitely. Also, kind of thinking about that, like especially when you come from a family of like first generation immigrants, it's very like it's very like I feel like I truly had to teach myself how to care for myself because my parents they didn't. I feel like they still don't like care for themselves in the way that they need, and it's kind of like this. You know, they came to America, this American dream, constant like grind culture, hustle culture, where they're like, they feel like, I don't know, just kind of emotional needs were always kind of put on the back burner, or kind of even like family needs, in like, as opposed to like constantly needing to like be ready to work all the time, and just kind of like how they push that on, or like how my parents kind of push that culture in our household a lot. And so definitely like, I don't know, with being a woman of color, it's like literally we have to teach ourselves like how to care for ourselves. And a lot of the times I think that we do have good examples of what care looks like from like maternal figures. But it's definitely, I think that like as generations pass, like kind of what self-care like looks like for a group of people definitely changes a lot, like within the cultural context.
Yeah, and I would say that generationally, in the clients that I serve are predominantly I work with teens and women of color who this idea of self-care is foreign to them, because all they know is that mom has worked 2 or 3 jobs, trying to keep the family together, also being a housekeeper. And so this concept, this idea that you mean to tell me I got to put myself first, I have to take care of me, they feel guilty about it. And so it kind of working through some of that, I'm finding in counseling is really, again, people struggle with boundaries, right? And things of that nature, because this idea of self-care is so foreign to them, because all they know is just to kind of keep going and keep going and keep things going. And so now to put them first and prioritize themselves can be challenging. So it is a journey. It is a journey, even when learning how to enforce boundaries, express your boundaries, because a lot of times we've been taught to just keep the peace. From the cultural context, culturally, you just keep the peace. You know, you don't want to have conflict, to do what's necessary, just go along with the flow. And yet we're still continue to suffer in silence.
I think we often forget, like, society was built around being a straight white male, so don't feel bad of taking care of yourself. You should also, like, I know, like, because I'm first generation, I feel like I have to teach my mother and my grandmother how important it is to take care of themselves, because how they grew up is way different from us. So, like, they grew up that they have to care for the man, they have to care for the children. So don't completely blame, like, the way that your parents act. I guess it has to do with the way that they were raised. So I think that we also have to, like, break down that barrier in order to completely promote the necessity of taking care of yourself and prioritizing mental health.
And I think we just have to accept, as you said, that our parents did the best. You know, people before us did the best they could with what they knew how to do, with the tools that they had. But we can change the narrative, and we can change that in the family. We can be the change agent. Yeah.
Right. And then also, I think we kind of brought up the idea of like a bit of having a bit of guilt around self-care. And I think it's really interesting because a lot of the times we have this idea that, like, or like saying, like, your parents saying, like, oh, like, you're lazy, or like, you're only paying attention to yourself, you're selfish for partaking in self-care. A lot of the times I think about how, like, I don't know, you truly need to take time and energy for yourself to be able to show up for others in a way that honors them and yourself. So I feel like a lot of the times, like, I don't know, things like self-care, like, a lot of the times they're done in a communal or they can be done in a communal context or in, like, a cultural context where, like, I don't know, just you doing things to, like, care for yourself, like, truly you're doing that to, like, also care for, like, your siblings, your family, you know, I don't know. Yeah, you choose, like,
yeah, but you know, I want you to leave with that, the notion that the fact that you can't serve from an empty cup. We're servant leaders, but we can't serve from an empty cup. We have to be intentional about our well-being and how we show up. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So we're gonna actually jump into the questions from the audience. I'm going to have Lalita read one of the questions from the Q&A. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. How do you advise teenagers to adapt to the new normal?
As a teenager myself, I can say that I guess the idea of normal is always changing, especially in this current climate that we're in. So I think if you just try not to isolate yourself from others, and if you find a group of people that are going through the same thing that you're going through, it can be very helpful. Because if you just, like, depend on your own self to promote your mental well-being, it's not gonna end up being the best as it would be if you had others that could experience this with you. So just try not to be alone in times like this where we have to adapt to a new normal, and try to, like, adjust to your routine by reaching out to other people and seeing how they're also doing that.
Okay.
Do your best to stay connected. Yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Melinda, do I read all of them?
Natasha, you can read the next one. Let's just go one at a time.
Okay.
Okay. And somebody asked, what advice would you give to the students whose main cause of declining mental health is their school or grades?
Can she repeat that, Natasha? Can you repeat that? I thought I heard you say put something about grades.
Somebody asked, what advice would you give to students whose main cause of declining mental health is because of their school or their grades?
I would say to know that you are more than a letter grade. You are more than a grade. Grade is just one part. It's not all of you.
right.
It doesn't tell the whole story.
Earlier we were talking about kind of like this, like, consumerist, capitalist, hyper-productive society that we're in, and it's definitely important to remember that we place so much emphasis on grades and stuff because that's, like, what we're told that we need to do, or like that's like that we're, like, literally society, like, pushes onto us that grades are, like, our defining factor. Like it becomes so much of your world. But the reality is that like it's not. Like it's kind of something that's literally pushed onto us. It's like making, I don't know, we consume so much of our world around like school or like around our careers, around what we do. And the reality is there's so many ways to be productive. There's so many ways to do meaningful things that are meaningful to you that like that aren't like reflected by school.
We're more than a letter grade. It's just one part. It's one snapshot. We have to practice reframing our thoughts, you know, fact checking our thoughts. Like you're thinking about what are the facts, you're thinking about your grades, especially if you're a rising senior. Keep in mind that you're going through this collective global trauma. Okay, a pandemic has impacted everyone's grades. Everyone has been impacted. And knowing that, you know, university admissions counselors, the team, they're taking all of that into consideration. But you're more than just a grade. And so if you can believe that and accept that, that will really reduce some of this anxiety about, oh, I have to get this 4.0, I have to get all these A's. Yeah. There's more to you besides a grade. There's nothing wrong with aspiring to have A's and B's or whatever your goals are. I'm not saying that at all, but to know that you're more than that grade and try not to let the grade, the idea of this certain letter grade, cloud your thoughts. That impacts your mental health and your anxiety, and sometimes can really exacerbate anxiety and depression, thinking you're not good enough. And this negative thinking that we tell ourselves, being so self-judgmental and so self-critical because we didn't get this particular grade. So you're a failure. No, you're not. You're a thriver. You're a survivor.
Right.
A warrior.
I feel like a lot of school, like public schooling, they truly don't engage multiple learning styles. Like it's truly like they expect everyone to conform to one learning style. And the workforce, like life after school, is truly not like that. Sometimes it is like, I don't know, when you're an adult, you're still kind of expected to do things in a really specific way. But in school, I don't know, like the idea that grades determine how smart you are. Like some of the smartest people I know would get the worst grades. And I think sometimes it was because they just realized that it wasn't worth stressing over, that like they will accomplish everything that they want to accomplish regardless of what their grades in high school were. And the same is true for all of you. Yeah. I don't know. Also, it's just, I don't know. Schooling like truly doesn't, I don't know. Having a bad grade doesn't mean that you're like not smart.
It doesn't at all.
It doesn't at all. Yeah.
Exactly. The most successful people drop out of high school and college. That is true. It's not about the grades. It's about your will, your determination, and how do you move forward. Right. It tells one part. It's a small part of the story.
Right. And so much like learning, so much like knowledge production that we have can come from like outside of school. Like you can, I don't know, you can like realize that grades are evil and that like high school administrators don't actually matter, while still valuing your education or still valuing school and like knowledge. I don't know, it's I think it's really like, for something like school, it's good to like acknowledge the good parts, like the social aspects you get out of school, while kind of being able to distance yourself from all of the incredible stress that students are put under.
Right. And even I shared that I didn't have this 4.0 in undergrad, but when I applied to graduate school, I had work experience. And I had rich work experience. I took a break, a 10-year break, and I had rich work experience. And I was able to discuss that in my personal statement and what I can bring to the counseling profession, what I can bring to the graduate program, what I can bring to the community that I serve. And that made me a very ideal candidate for a graduate program in which I continue to move forward and get my PhD. And so I just want you to be encouraged that, you know, it's not about the grade all the time. It's about the full story and how, what you bring to the table besides that. And especially when we look at standardized test scores, I did not score well on the GRE, but I had work experience. I was able to sell my story and then believe in my story because I believed in myself. And I had the confidence in what I was able to do and got through it.
No, true. I also think that it's actually like it's kind of bad when we invest too much of ourselves in our grades, because a lot of the times, like, admission boards, college boards, they do care about grades. Like, that's how you get your foot in the door. But that's really they don't just look at you as like your grades. Like, they want to see the entirety of who you are. Like, they truly do want to know what you can bring to them besides good grades a lot of the time.
Like, as a high school student in a public school, I can say that a lot of, like, the main advice that you'd get from asking this question is go to your guidance counselor, but I can say that I don't find that helpful at all. So unfortunately, we have to rely on our own selves to kind of like figure out what we should prioritize, and just sometimes just not focusing on your grades at all can be really good mentally, and just like not checking your grades. I wouldn't say it's bad to not completely care about your grades, but it's also important to prioritize other things, because if you know that your mental health is declining specifically because of school, just try not to focus too much on that and spend your time investing into other things that will make you happy, because I find that when I find myself more happy, I end up getting better grades. So instead of overworking and stressing yourself out, use that energy to something more productive in a positive way, and the output might end up being better than what you would have gotten if you overworked yourself.
Right. Also, I really like what you said about just, I don't know, think about like what you want to invest yourself into. Is it grades? I don't know, in 5-10 years, you're truly not going to think about your high school grades, but you will think about like the hobbies and the friends you had, and like, I don't know, just the other things that were in your life. So definitely, I don't know, if you're like thinking a lot about your grades, or you're getting really, really stressed out, it's important to like reassess, like, what am I actually invested in? What do my grades actually like mean in my life? And yeah.
Great conversation. I mean, this can keep going for like the next 3 hours. We're all interested, but unfortunately, we have to give the stage to other amazing topics that we have scheduled for today. So I'm going to transition us out with another giveaway. So we have winners for another giveaway. It'll be put on the screen shortly. Okay, we have Zatara Astafan Juni. That's our first winner. Congratulations. I'm sorry, you get AirPods, it looks like, or wireless headphones. Congratulations. Awesome. Well, I just want to give a warm thank you to Dr. Brown, Amanda, and Sonya. You have shared some amazing tools and information for our teens on the call today. And even for me, as a 33-year-old adult, I'm sitting here and I'm so thankful for all of you and for your experiences that I was able to hone in on today. And also the girls who helped me with the panel. I'm so thankful for all of you. Ladies, if you want to say a quick thank you to our panelists, go right ahead. If not, then we can take a 10-minute break.
Thank you all. I really enjoyed it. I'm on social media, Instagram, Dr. Shanita Brown. I love to stay connected with your organization. Look forward to hopefully partnering again. We can talk about some of my areas of expertise, like teen dating violence. And so keep up the good work. I'm so inspired. And I hope you walk away with some tools to thrive and, keep working on your wellness plan and self-care.
Thank y'all for this conversation. It was
this is really good.
Yeah, it was a great way for, I don't know, great midday content. Yeah.
Thank you guys for the opportunity.
Thank you. All right, take care. All right, bye-bye.